Whoops. I wasn't on. There we go. Is the audio working? Let's see. Where are we? There's actually people here already. 49. Let's check. Where are we? Okay, audio is working. I think everything is okay. Cool. So today with the beer fund from previous lives, I managed to find this gem. I have manual focus on now. Let's see. Let's see if we can do it. Woo! Lahden Erikois Summer 2024. American Pale Ale. And it's green. Okay. That's what we're dealing with today. Thank you very much. I think Bauman has basically paid for this with his super chats. Thank you. No, not bad. Not bad. Okay, so let me see. Let me close some windows here. So much going on. Comments are heating up. Nice. Today we're going to talk about this thing. What am I going to show with this? I'm going to demonstrate how Kickup and Antisquat works. Okay. I actually think it's going to be easier to show this way. I'm going to switch the tire over, I think. So we're going to talk about Kickup, talk about Antisquat, explain what's going on. That's one thing we're going to do. We're going to talk about Silver State, and then we're going to have a therapy session at the end of this. We are going to talk about perception versus reality. That's going to be the topic. And until we reach a particular number, we're going to do Q&A. So, what's the number? I'll be catching up with comments, and you can ask questions until we can start what I just explained, talking about Kickup and that stuff, Silver State. So we need a number right now. What's the number? How many people can we get on here? What do you say? 188, 41, 169. Can we really reach 100? Can we? 85 is maybe more realistic. What do you say? I'm not very confident about reaching 100. Maybe if you share this on Rhonda Drake's Facebook page, we'll get a bunch of people. And everyone watching, call your moms. Get your mom to watch. Okay? I'm just testing this idea out here. Okay. Yeah. I think it will work. 69. That's not ambitious enough. We're already at 66. Okay, well, we can't even settle on a number. I'm gonna say an 85. That's possible. Okay, coach, 87. We have to have 87, so 20 more people watching, and then we start. Okay, so what you need to do, someone here watching, just share on your social media, and get people to watch, and then we can start. That's how this works. Okay. So share the stream. Maybe we can get enough so we can actually start. Until then, ask questions in the chat. Let's see if there are any questions already. Oh crap! I can't even. There's no hub on this damn thing. That sucks. That sucks. My plan was foiled. Well, you can still make it work. The hole in the wall fund. Yeah. Well, I haven't got enough money in super chats to fix the hole. That's right there. It's a hole in the wall. It's fixing, but can't afford it. Landlord might have to fix it one day. It's possible. $74. 11 more people. In the online video course, will you upload some of the basic missing videos, such as rear diff, track width, wheelbase? Yes, I will one day. One day I'll do that. There are 7 videos that are filmed, but they need editing, they need some B-roll, and just sales are low. Sales are low. What can I say? Not enough motivation to get it done for peanuts. Chicken and egg problem, isn't it? Can you also explain the difference between caster and kickup, how it feels on track? Probably not. Probably not today. Sorry to disappoint. Today we're talking about kickup and anti-squat. What fuel do you prefer? Nitro fuel with 25 or 30% nitro. I run Nitrolux. Nitrolux from Modelix in Spain. That's what I run. Are you coming to Lone Star this weekend? No, I'm not. Watching live today, don't disappoint, Mr. Therapist. I might. We need 10 more people. How was your first MX race? It was awesome, actually. My second motocross race will be this Saturday. But yeah, it's a whole different world, really. To just ride or to race, it's 2 complete different things almost. It's great. So very happy that I started racing. Viewers going down because there's no good questions. People aren't sharing. What's the engineering word of the new Hongno? What? I don't know. It's not new. There's no new Hongno, is there? I haven't seen any new Hongno. Whatever happened to the JQ van? Became a Mayako van? Yes, it did. Well, it does actually say JQSM still, but JQ Scale Motorsports. That's what when RCGP still existed and all that stuff. Will you be coming to the Eurobe? No. No, I won't. I don't know if Robert's going. He had a wedding to attend or something. I don't know. Exactly. Need more sails on invisible speed courses to fix the hull. Yes. Will that one day that I finish those videos and upload them to the course be at least by the time before my 3-month access is over and done with? Asks Mr. Sweek. And my answer is maybe, but I wouldn't count on it. Today I uploaded that previous LUTs live to the course, and in 2 weeks' time, on the 30th of May, we have a live meeting in the course with Ryan Lutz. So you should be there. It seems that caster tuning on pillow ball cars does more things than on a C-Hub. Is it true? No, but you have the ability to do more things because you can angle the upper arm differently, which you can't really do on a C-Hub car because the lower arm is fixed. So let's say like caster is the same thing in both, but you have more options available to you with a pillow ball car. Let's see. On a high grip track, if raising the rear arm height helps to support the car more from dumping to the outside wheel, then why, if we do the same to the front end, does the car want to flip over more? Well, it's the same. Like if you raise the lower arm here on the inside, so arm height, you keep the same angle, but you raise the arm. You're raising the roll center. It's the same front or rear, but when you go into a corner, that's normally where you flip. Going in or reaching the middle of the corner, load is transferring to the front. You are turning the car. If you have a high roll center, let's say your arms are about level or you're going the corner like that even, what can happen with a high roll center is you turn and the geometry wants to lift the car up. If the geometry lifts the car up, it tends to roll over, right? The rear does the same, but the reason why you don't feel it as much or as soon is that when you get on power, the rear squats down. That's where when the larger forces are on the rear. When you're driving into a corner, the rear is light. The front is what dominates. So normally if you flip over, it's because of the front end. But if you go too high on the rear end, also you will see that the rear end jacks up and that causes the car to flip over. So yeah, that's why. The front end is more sensitive to a high roll center for flipping over, and the rear end is more sensitive to a high roll center losing grip. But the rear can also cause a car to flip over, especially with bumps. So your sort of assumption is backwards there. It's wrong. It does the same front and rear. And we are actually past 85. That answer was so long that we went to 95 people. Mission accomplished. Okay. Okay, let's see Monteiro first before we continue. I believe you end up lowering the axle height, which then does also stiffen up suspension. No, you don't, because the distance from the lower pivot point to the axle remains the same. That's the relevant distance. That's like talking about bent links and them changing roll center. They don't. What's relevant is the actual physical distance between axle and lower joint. So the axle height doesn't change when you change caster. Okay. David Bauman, €5. Thank you very much. Let's drink to that. come on, people, I should not be the only one constantly paying the BS for free knowledge for you all. Exactly. I agree with Bauman. Need some more super chats. Okay. So what we are over 85. I have to start. What was it? Silver State first. Actually, no. Let's do Kickup and Antisquat first. Okay. Thank you, Don. Don't listen to David. Okay. We're going to talk about Silver State later and then transition into the therapy portion of this. But this setup thing is actually relevant to Silver State because DNC got really rough. The track got super bumpy, and the same thing was expected at Silver State. Now, there are two changes, one to the front of the car and one to the rear of the car, which work really well for rough tracks, rough, bumpy tracks. When DNC was on, I didn't go, but everyone's friend, Greg Degani, he was there. And he was struggling. He was qualifying in around 30th place in 40 plus, which is not normal, but he was struggling with the setup of the car. Now, he called me and I didn't pick up, and I said, look, I don't want to talk. So he started messaging me on WhatsApp. And the thing is that we went back and forth for a while, just trying to figure out what the hell he was running. What setup does he actually have? Okay. Once we had established that, then I gave him a few ideas for what to change. And typical for RC racers, they want help, then you provide it to them, and then they don't take that advice on board. They start to argue with you. And I said, look, you asked me for help. I gave it to you. If you're going to argue, I'm going to waste my time. I'm going to block you until Monday. That's what I said. Then he shut up and listened. And then he actually made the changes required. And the last qualifying round, he got 5th. Now, he made a mistake. He said like he was actually on for like a top 2, top 3 run. So it was really good. It was a big change. Now, I can't remember exactly. Yeah, we did some kind of link changes, but they were minor. But the major changes that I suggested to him was kick up on the front to increase the kick up, to go max kick up. And then on the rear to reduce anti-squat, to go to just 1 degree. Because the way he had his car set up was maybe from the Worlds or something, I can't remember. But anyway, he had the opposite on his car. Low kick up, a lot of anti-squat. And I don't know why he didn't think of this himself, because it's such a basic option, setup option. But I bet you what? I bet you there are other people who also don't think of this. So I am going to demonstrate to you why kick up and anti-squat are so good for so good changes to make for different tracks. Okay. So let's start with the front. Okay. I think what I will want to do is I'm going to want to figure out how to focus there. Okay. Here we go. So now, when you look at this, you know that the car is heading in this direction over there, right? That's the front. We have a tire here because it's kind of relevant. The tire is what grips the track. All the forces that affect the car, they start here at the contact patch of tire on the track. So let's think about this now. On a bumpy track, you want to run more kick up. What is kick up? It's basically, if we look at the lower arm, the angle of it. Now I'm moving the whole gearbox, but don't worry about that. Imagine that it's just the angle of the arm. So more kick up would mean that the arm is angled like this. Do you see? So horizontal arm, a lot of kick up. Let's make this very clear. Horizontal, the arm is horizontal. With kick up, the arm is angled up like that. You see? Remember, this is forward. Okay? So now, when we're on a bumpy track and we have a lot of kick up, now we never have 45 degrees of kick up like here, but imagine we did. What would happen if I was to accelerate now? Yeah, if I start accelerating, this part of the tire that's touching, when my fingers are now, it's touching the ground, starts pulling the car forward. The wheel is attached here at the axle, so the axle wants to move forward. The car is lazy. The car is just a fucking lump of metal and plastic, doesn't know what's going on, doesn't want to do anything, doesn't want to move, but the axle will begin to pull the car forward. So if I force this axle forward, what's going to happen to the suspension? What do you think will happen if we have an angle like that? Viewing from the front, it's going up. It's going up. Think about it 90 degrees. If we had a 90-degree kick up, tire wants to move forward. What the hell? It's working the suspension. You see what I mean? If you have a horizontal arm, perfectly horizontal arm, and we push the axle, the suspension doesn't move in any direction. We add a whole bunch of kick up, and now when you move the suspension, when you move the axle forward, you're pushing the axle forward with kick up, it's working the suspension. Are you all following? When we have a lot of kick up and we accelerate the car, the fact that the axle is what's pushing or pulling the car, the axle wants to move forward, then it pulls the car along. It also lifts the suspension. When we brake, what happens? If we have a horizontal arm and we brake, the first thing that wants to stop is the tire at the track. So the wheel wants to stop, which means the wheel acts on the car at the axle. With that horizontal arm, the wheel stopping, the axle wants to stop. What happens? The body of the car, it has inertia. It wants to keep moving. It doesn't want to stop. It wants to continue. So the axle stops. The body of the car wants to keep moving. With a horizontal arm, okay, the suspension doesn't move. But we had a lot of kick up. What happens when the body wants to keep moving? So suspension compresses. I'm stopping the wheel, stopping the axle. The body keeps moving. We have a large angle. Boom. Suspension compresses. Are you following? So horizontal front arm in the side view means that when we accelerate or brake, doesn't have an effect on the suspension. When we add kick up, which was angling the front more up, when we accelerate, the front lifts. When we brake, the front goes down. It means that the suspension, the front end of the car will rise up more, lower more. The suspension is more free to move. That's a good thing on a bumpy track because the ride height will be higher as you drive around the track. Wait a minute. Oh, Lefty came in here, but he disappeared. I don't know what happened there. So we want to have a lot of front kick up to allow the suspension to absorb bumps and also ride higher as we drive along the track. So on the gas, the car will be a bit higher off the track, more ride height, more travel to navigate the bumps. Device is not connected. Wait a minute. Sorry, I think Lefty logged in here, which annoys me. I don't think I can remove him. Okay, so is that clear now for the front kick up? When it's bumpy, we want the suspension to be able to move. I will explain another reason for this being good when we talk about the rear. Okay, the same thing applies for the rear. Okay, so now we do it a bit quicker because we have already done this once. Okay, hopefully this clears things up even more. So looking at the rear, where did I focus it there? Looking at the rear of the car. Now remember, everything that's happening is happening here where my thumb is, where the tire is contacting the track. That is how you can affect the body of the car. The wheel is attached to the hex, the axle. So all the forces from the track are transferred to the car through the axle. So with a horizontal arm, if the axle wants to start moving forward, as the tire wants to roll forward, it will just push the car. The body of the car doesn't want to move. Tire wants to move. Axle pushes the car forward. Now, what would happen if we added anti-squat? So now the arm isn't horizontal anymore. There is an angle to it. Now when the axle wants to move forward, the body of the car still doesn't want to move. There is a movement that happens. What is that? It's raising the rear end. So accelerating the car wants to raise the rear end, right? In reality, what's happening is when you accelerate, we all know this. If you've ever sat in a car, for example, and accelerated, what do you feel? You start to accelerate, you feel yourself being forced back. That happens in all cars when you accelerate. Load wants to transfer onto the rear. So normally when you accelerate, the rear of the car will squat down. The rear of the car, the suspension would compress, right? As soon as you start to accelerate, the rear compresses. Well, now we just demonstrated that if you add anti-squat and you start accelerating, there is a force that wants to lift the car up. The suspension wants to lift up. So if you balance the load transfer that wants to squat the car down and the anti-squat angle that when you accelerate wants to lift the car up, the rear end of the car would actually stay level. So you begin to accelerate and the suspension doesn't move. Load wants to transfer, compress the rear suspension. The anti-squat angle wants to lift the rear of that car up. Those two forces, when they are equal, mean that the suspension wouldn't move as you accelerate. Okay? Does that make sense to you? Do you understand what I'm talking about? If we had no kick up, no anti-squat, load would want to transfer, moving the suspension. When you brake, the car dives onto the front. When you accelerate, the rear squats. When we add kick up on the front, we angle it up. We go in this direction. We're angling the arm, a lot of kick up. We make the front end move more. When we brake, it will go down more. When we accelerate, it goes up more. This is good for bumpy tracks because the car rides higher and the suspension is allowed to absorb bumps, the geometry doesn't stiffen the car up. It aids in the natural movement. The load is transferring to the front dives. The geometry also wants to make the car dive. So there's nothing binding the suspension up. We have a good damping. The shock is allowed to work freely in a sense. The suspension isn't hindering it. So it's good in bumps. On the rear, when we accelerate, the rear wants to squat, but when we have anti-squat, we are resisting that squatting, which means the suspension will be stiffer, not allowing the suspension to move, not allowing the shock, the damper, to absorb a bump, which means that when we have this anti-squat, it's worse in bumps. Am I making sense? So on the front, it's the same thing. If we didn't have that kick up and we had less kick up for off-road, because we never go the other direction. In on-road, they go the other direction, anti-dive it's called. Just the fact that we go to a smaller angle will stop that aiding of movement, and we will notice that the car isn't as good in bumps anymore. Now, if we did what the on-road drivers do, which is on the front, again, we're moving this way, they angle the arm the opposite direction. That's like anti-squat for the front. When you brake, there is a force that wants to lift the car again. On the front, you angle it the other way, you brake, the wheel stops, the axle stops, the body keeps moving. What happens? It tries to lift, extend the suspension. So then, in that case, if we ran anti-dive in our cars, in our off-road buggies, the front end would be very stiff going into corners, and it would not handle the bumps well at all, because the geometry of the car, the braking, the load transferring to the front wanting to dive, the shocks wanting to work, we are using geometry to stop that from happening, making the suspension very stiff. So you brake and the front end doesn't dive, and that will make the car bouncy on the bumps, and that's not something we want. So for us, we always have kick up, but when it's a bumpy track, we increase it to encourage the movement of the suspension. And when it's a smooth track, we decrease it to keep the car more level, to keep more control. On the rear, we always use anti-squat. I don't think anyone ever uses pro squat, because pro squat would mean that as you accelerate, the rear wants to squat, and then the geometry also wants to squat the car. So it wouldn't make any sense. Let's check. I'm going to talk a bit about the rear braking still, but let's check if there were any comments here. Oh, that cleared it up. In a sense, you add move more forces into the suspension. If suspension is soft, it even keep the chassis more level, so it will eat more bumps. Thanks. Not when you keep. Okay, let's deal with that in a bit. We have a super chat. Hi Joe, I run S-Works S35 for Evo e-buggy. I notice a lot of pro setups use thick front rear diff oils. Yeah, we're not talking about diffs right now. You did send a super chat, for which I'm thankful, but stay in your lane. We aren't talking about diffs now. Okay, isn't kick up also anti-dive? Yes, so we just covered that. We use kick up. Anti-dive would be the arms in the opposite direction. On-road, they do that, but not off-road. Also, when you hit a bump with a lot of kick up, is it ready to absorb because you hit not in the contact patch, but in front of the tires? Well, when you imagine the car, again, driving on a bumpy track, if you have big bumps and you're basically hitting them higher up here already, not even at the contact patch, higher up, and with a perfectly horizontal arm, if you have something stopping the car from the front, it doesn't want to deflect the suspension. But if you have a lot of kick up and you imagine the wheel getting hit because you're driving into a bump, that kick up helps to move the suspension. It's the same as, braking under load, but when you hit something, you hit a bump, you are navigating the track with more kick up, it's more natural. It's the natural direction for that suspension to get deflected. So again, not having geometry that makes the movement of that suspension harder, stiffer. Okay, so we continue a bit. Hopefully that made sense, that it's basically, kick up and anti-squat is basically the tire that wants to pull the car forward through the axle, and then just think about it and maybe grab your own car and figure out that if the axle wanted to move forward now to pull the car, which way would the suspension go, right? Think about it in that way. And often it's also better to exaggerate the angle to get the idea. That, for example, on the rear of the car, when you look at it, don't imagine just like 1 degree of anti-squat, like, oh, what's going to happen? I don't really know. No, imagine that you had 70 degrees of anti-squat. What would happen if the axle now moved forward? Okay, it would extend the suspension. That means there's an upward force there. And when I accelerate, the suspension naturally wants to squat. So, okay, anti-squat, yeah, I understand now how that works. You can figure out these things for yourself too, right? Well, so we have a comment, anti-squat will add more initial grip on acceleration. Exactly. Initial grip refers to a more responsive car, when you have grip that increases quickly. Whenever you have something in the geometry that stiffens the suspension, doesn't allow the rear to squat, for example, it means that load will transfer faster to the tire or to the track from the tire. Like the wheel will be pushed, the tire will be pushed into the ground more faster. So initially, more grip. Initially, more load on the tire. Initially, more grip. That makes the car more responsive. Kick up and anti-squat, they don't really increase or decrease the total amount of load transfer. They change the time it takes for the load to transfer, similar to roll centers. So it's not about how much load transfers, it's how quickly it transfers. And on a track, we always have a finite amount of time. So in that sense, it's not important that maximum possible load transfer. No, that doesn't interest us. What interests us is in a particular moment in time where you break into a corner and turn, for example, in that moment, how much load transfers in that fraction of a second. That's what we're doing with setup. If we allow the car to move a lot, we are transferring less load. If we make it stiff, we transfer more load quicker. So that more load transfer quickly with the stiff suspension, often done with a geometry, that means that we will have more grip on those tires initially, more response. Okay, so next thing we didn't touch on yet is what happens when you brake. We covered it for the front. So kick up encourages the front to dive under braking and lift under acceleration. It encourages the suspension movement. It's good in bumps. On the rear, we always use anti-squat. We covered that it has an upward force. It wants to lift the rear upwards when you accelerate. And when you add that to the fact that normally the rear wants to squat, when you balance those up, it means that the rear just stays flat when you accelerate. But what about when you brake? And this is something that's often overlooked. So if we again look at the rear end here, and we remember anti-squat is like that. So we are going in this direction, right? So horizontal arm, now we add some anti-squat. And now we imagine that we are braking. So this, where my thumb is now, is touching the track and wants to stop. And the axle is where the force is affecting the body of the car. So what happens now? The body is moving, the car is moving, and the tire stops, the axle stops. What happens? Do you see that? The suspension compresses. Okay, well, that's interesting because it's, again, the opposite movement that would naturally want to occur. Because think about it. So when you brake and you are sitting in a car, what happens? You brake, oh, you move forward, right? So on a car, when you brake, the rear would want to go up. The front dives and the rear goes up. Well, when we have anti-squat, I just showed you, when you brake and you have anti-squat, the suspension compresses. So the anti-squat is under braking, working in the opposite direction to what the car naturally wants to do. The car wants to raise the rear end. Anti-squat is stopping it from lifting up. Again, trying to keep the suspension horizontal or like level, doesn't want to move up, actually wants to move down. Those two forces are against each other. So if you balance them out and you brake, the rear wouldn't actually move up. Now, this is why when you have anti-squat, you accelerate, you have more initial grip. When you brake, you go into a corner, you actually have less rear grip. You have more steering with more rear anti-squat. Because if you allowed that rear to lift up, you have more overall grip. You're allowing the tires to grip the track more. Imagine you reduce droop a lot. You have a lot of droop, you allow that rear to rise up. You have very little droop, you brake, the rear tires are off the ground. It's kind of a similar effect with a lot of anti-squat. The anti-squat doesn't allow that rear to lift up, but that's where the rear wants to go. If you don't allow that from happening, what's going to happen? Stiff suspension reduces the load on the rear tires as you brake. So these changes are very powerful and very good to do depending on the surface of the track. On a smooth track, you want to increase initial grip. You want to increase responsiveness. You want to keep the chassis more level. You don't want it to move too much. So you run low amounts of kick up and high amounts of anti-squat. As the track gets dustier, bumpier, rougher, more difficult, then you add kick up on the front to make the front end more calm and stable, navigate bumps better, not get so upset. And you reduce rear anti-squat for the same reasons, to add more overall grip, more grip entering corners, more grip mid-corner, allow it to handle bumps better. And those two changes were the main changes I told Degani to do. Go max kick up on the front, go, I think, half a degree, I said, maybe one. Low degree of anti-squat on the rear. And his car was a lot better because the front end navigated the bumps well, the rear end navigated the bumps well, and it had better grip for him. So I hope this made sense. Whenever you have geometry that resists what the car naturally wants to do, it means that you are transferring load faster. which means that you have more initial grip, which means that you potentially have a faster car, but it's harder to drive. And also, if there are bumps on the track, most likely it's going to be worse in the bumps, because when you make stiff geometry, you are not allowing the suspension to do its work. That's what we're talking about. And this is actually why, well, we'll get to it in a therapy session of this, but the therapy session is sort of about car setup and cars, but also the human experience, we can say. So we are going to talk about that in a bit, but this is why it's so important to understand the basics. And one of the most misunderstood things is load transfer, where people are looking at cars and they are moving a lot and they say, oh, that's load transfer. Like if the front of the car dives a lot when you brake, it has a lot of load transfer. No, it's actually the opposite. You understand that that's the direction of load transfer, but if you see a car that's diving a lot, it's delaying the load transfer. It has more overall grip. If in the same situation you have a car that you brake and nothing happens, that car will actually have more load transfer in that moment, because the suspension isn't allowed to move. So whatever's happening, the geometry is resisting that movement, loading the tires more. And that is a fundamental misunderstanding, which will cause you to not understand any of the setup, basically, if you don't understand that point. Capiche? Okay, let's deal with some questions. But you know what? With old age comes many breaks. I saw a comment or something like that over there. I need to go pee. So just wait a minute and I'll be back. Okay. Come on, to mess something up here. What is going on? Okay, we are back. With tons of front kick-up, can kind of make the car flippy when turning because the tire goes on edge more and raises ride height. I mean, no, not really. So if you're going to flip over, it's normally entering a corner, right? Where you are slowing down, where the front will dive, where the front will be low. So it wouldn't cause you to flip over easier because of that. But that reminded me of something. Why do you want to keep the car more level on a smooth track, for example? you would want that because you want the alignments of the tires to remain as good as possible, as constant as possible. We have camber change. When you compress the suspension, the camber changes, it increases. You don't want, like, you want the tires to be as vertical as possible, to have the most amount of grip, right? So the more the chassis of the car moves, the more the camber of the tires and the contact patch of the tires are changing, and you don't want that. You want it to keep as stable as possible. So that's one reason for you not wanting excess movement of the chassis. Just reminded me of that. Okay, what else? That's why with more anti-squat, rear lifts up during braking. If you mean lifts up, you mean like you can see the rear tires off the ground? Do you mean that? Like you brake hard in the rear? Do you mean that it actually sort of the rear tires come off the ground? Do you mean by that? Do you mean rear lifts up during braking? Tires off the ground? Is that what you mean? Because that would be a yes. So then on a high grip smooth track, would it be more ideal to have as little kick up as possible, more flat arm, so the car doesn't dive as much, therefore resisting traction roll? Yes. Yes, it would be. But again, now we need to understand something. It doesn't resist traction roll. So traction roll doesn't happen because you are allowing the suspension to move. The suspension moving delays traction roll. The thing is that one of two things can happen. Let's say you have a little amount of kick, small amount of kick up, or maybe you even go like in on-road and you have anti-dive. So you have a very stiff front end, okay? Brake doesn't compress, it doesn't dive. If you turn in at that moment, you have a lot of grip, a lot of load on the tires in that moment, which can potentially flip the car over quickly. But on the other hand, what can happen is you overload the front actually, and it pushes. When you allow the suspension to move, let's say you have a lot of kick up, initially you turn in and it doesn't flip over. No, it will dive and roll. And a good driver will have time enough to sort of control that. But it is true that then at the limit, like if you go too far then on that high grip, then it will flip over. So it's not, how can I say this? So the fact that you are reducing kick up makes it easier for you to drive the car and not flip over. Drive the car fast and not flip over, I would say. But it's not like it's not resisting traction roll. Like the fact that the car doesn't dive does not resist traction roll. Does that make sense? Am I making sense? It's just that when you have a car that doesn't move too much and you're driving the car, you have a feeling for like, okay, this is the speed and how much I turn, it will flip over now. Okay, but I have to drive within that. Okay, now I'm fine. I'm good. You drive in control and you don't flip over. If you have a car on high grip, high speed that moves a lot, it's harder for you to control that in a sense because the precision is lost. And it's hard for you to drive it close to that limit of what it can take because the car is moving so much. And then at the end of that, it could flip over. I don't know if I'm making sense, but it's like the way you worded this, I understand why you would say it, but it's not accurate. Like, that's not why we do that. High grip smooth track, you reduce kick up to get a car that's easier to drive and more precise, and it stays more level. But it can still flip over if the roll center is too high, for example. The roll center is more that what dictates that, if it's on the track or in the track. Okay, so we had a super chat come in. Where is it? There we go. Blake Baker. Is there a time when you would add kick up or anti-squat on smoother or higher grip tracks? Well, kick up you wouldn't add, so we just covered that. You would reduce kick up because you want the car to stay more level. Well, the same thing, you would add anti-squat because you want the car to stay more level. The thing about these is that it's more initial grip, so there's a limit to everything. When you reduce kick up, the front end is more responsive, the steering is more aggressive. So then it depends on the surface, the layout, how your car overall feels, where you need to remember easy versus fast. What can you as a driver deal with, and how is your car handling? Less kick up, more aggressive steering. And then anti-squat, kind of same thing. So more anti-squat, you have more steering into and through a corner. So maybe you would lose the rear end if it's a high grip track, but you can lose traction also. That could be a problem. Or there's some balance issue with your car, then you can't get away with a lot of anti-squat. But generally speaking, yes, that's kind of the direction to go. Smooth track, and it doesn't even really matter if it's high or low grip, because on low grip you need response and initial grip to initiate turns and to square up and go, and you need initial grip for that. And on high grip you need it to keep the chassis more level. Does ride height need to be lowered with more kick up anti-squat? Well, no, not really, because your car sort of has a natural ride height it wants to ride at with the roll center settings you have, and that's where it is. That's where it wants to be. Like diff height, axle height, roll center, the car wants to be somewhere. Anti-squat, kick up, it doesn't really affect that. Why is the feeling to have less kick up to have more steering generally? That's because more steering generally is often initial steering. If we have a car that turns into the corner well, we say we have a lot of steering. If the car pushes into the corner, but then maybe mid to exit turns a lot, we tend to still feel like we don't have enough steering, it pushes. So that's why when you reduce kick up, you have more initial grip, more initial steering, you feel like, oh, I have more steering. Okay, sorry about the bad explanation when we started. That's Lefty's fault. I will 100% blame him. He came in here in StreamYard and was like posting comments on screen and doing shit, which pissed me off. And I wasn't able to remove him. Traction roll is mostly based on ride height and droop setting, isn't it? No, it is mostly based on roll center settings. So high roll center, your car will keep flipping over. Low roll center, it will stay stuck to the ground. That is what it's mostly affected by. And then ride height and droop, and center of gravity height also. That's what it's mostly affected by. So if you lower your roll centers or you lower your center of gravity, that's going to help the most. And then ride height and droop, they are like minor adjustments you can make, let's say tweaks that you can do to it. Is it theoretically possible to delay load transfer that long to never hit full load transfer from a time point perspective? Yeah, that's what we are doing. So car is not flipping on Astro high grip scenarios, but make the corner already. Yes, so that's why when you run on super high grip, Astro, super high grip is when your car can't slide. So it is not possible to drift or slide. Like the car grips and then it will flip over. Like that's the limit. Either you are driving on the track or you have flipped over, but you cannot drive and slide. Okay. When you get to that point, you have to start going in the opposite direction for some setup things. Like you go to soft anti-roll bars, for example, to allow the car to roll, but then you still have hard springs probably, and you definitely have hard oils. And if you want to have very thick damping, you have to have big holes, few holes to still have the right amount of pack. So you have very slow, thick damping, which means that you allow the car to roll, but it's going to roll slowly. And because you allow the car to roll, but it rolls slowly, when you are navigating a section of the track, it rolls for long enough where you are already beginning to straighten out before it reaches that limit. So that's why that's the direction to go on a really high grip. You actually go to softer roll bars, very low roll centers, allow the car to move much, but you limit it with very slow damping so that in any section of the track, even though it could roll further, it doesn't have time to do that. And that's going to be the easiest car to drive in those situations. In on-road racing, they try to run as little steering angle as possible that they can get away with and try to use setup to get rotation from the car. Would a similar thing apply to off-road? Yes, because anytime that you have to steer the front tires a lot, they are basically like stopping the forward momentum of the car. Because if to make a corner like this, you have to turn the tire like that, and it's still just doing that same arc. Your tires are scrubbing, that sliding on the surface of the track, slowing the car down. The closer the angle of the tire is to the direction it's rolling, so there's not much sliding going on, the less that will slow the car down in a corner. So if to make corners you have to have very high front wheel turn angles, you're also slowing the car down in those corners. So if you can drive around the same corners with less steering input, and the direction the tires are pointing, the direction that they are actually going is closer to the same, then the car won't slow down that much. You'll have more corner speed. Now in on-road, that's very noticeable, but the same thing applies to off-road too. And that's one thing that separates great drivers from good drivers, is that they can drive more aggressive setups, cars that have more steering, and they don't turn as much. And then they have more steering if they need it, but they aren't driving around the track like this. Oh, this is easy. They aren't doing that. They're driving with small movements and less steering input. And then if they need more, they have it, but they control it as a driver, and the car is naturally faster. If you would take out Kickup on a higher grip, smoother track, if the steering got too aggressive but you liked how flat the car drives, what would you adjust to dial some steering back out? I would, well, let's just assume we have the right tires, and because tires is always the number one. Something that you could do is go to a very thick front diff. That's a good one because it reduces initial steering. You could make sure that you are running a low front roll center. So, for example, upper link up on the shock tower. Then if you have height adjustment, also make sure that the link is up on the C-hub also and up on the tower. A long front link, that also helps. Ackerman is very good. So if you have a steering knuckle with a adjustable length for the link, you would go to a long plate, so short steering link. That smooths out initial steering. So there's many things like that you could change to reduce, to keep the low kick up, to keep the chassis level, but then reduce the initial steering response in other ways. Beer and lighting fun. Thank you very much. Cheers. Orlovsky and other carpet drivers don't go to the point where the car never flips because the car too numb and slow. Okay, I don't quite understand what you mean. Like, Orlovsky is one of the best drivers in the world. So he is able to drive a car within the performance capabilities of it. He goes out there, he figures out how to drive it, and then that's where he keeps it. Where if we would take his car, maybe we would find all kinds of issues and problems with it, and we couldn't drive it, but it suits him. Now, he is actually a driver who, when I look at his cars and how they are set up and how they look on the track, he's a bit like Ty Tessman in the sense that the car is very much in the track. It's very much sort of soft, allowed to move a lot. Long, I would assume, I haven't looked now, but probably long links also for a setup like this, where it's in the track, it's allowed to move a lot, and he drives it with precise inputs to not push it too much. I think if a lower skilled driver would drive his car, his setup, they would overdrive it and it would sort of do too much. That's my sense. That's how it looks to me. How does this differ for Kickup in a pillow ball car to a C-hub car? It's the same, but we are only talking about the lower arm now. So on pillow ball cars, you can also angle the upper arm. You can make it not parallel with the lower arm, and that changes things. But we are not going to talk about that now. I paid $10 super chat to not have my question answered. Lol, shaking my head, all good. I'll just shut up and listen moving forward. Lol, happy to support. Okay, Kevin got his panties in a bunch. Let's see where are the super chats. Oh shit. Got a $10 super chat somewhere from Kevin. Let's see what he asked. All right, here we go. You run an S-Works. Pro setups use thick front and rear diff oils, 10K front and 5 to 6K rear. I mean, 10 front and 5 to 6 rear is pretty normal diff oils, I would say. Okay, wait a minute. Okay, I'm failing to see a question here. Am I stupid or what? Like, thank you very much for the support. But what is your question? DNC and Silver State more low grip to medium. Thanks. Yeah, they are. 10 and 5 is perfectly normal starting setup, I would say. Like it's, I don't know what the question is. Also, the topic isn't diffs. So I don't know what to say. Okay, we're done. We're done with Kickup and Antisquat. Kemi Mendes wants to re-ask his question, then I'll answer it. But now we need to move on. Okay. Shit, this took way longer than it was supposed to. Okay, do we do Silver State now or therapy? We talked about Silver State on the Non MRC podcast already, so we don't really need to talk about Silver State now. So what do you think? Tyrone's question. No, we're not talking about upper arms. Go ask ASquat om Mugen. This was the question. When you have an upper arm and you angle the upper arm so it's not this parallel with the lower arm. So if this is the front of the car going this way, you have kick up, then you have your upper arm, but you angle it differently. So maybe you angle it more than the lower arm, for example. What happens is, well, first of all, you have sort of active caster. The cast angle will change as the suspension moves, but also it will aid in either stiffening the suspension more, so aiding in the sort of effect, or if you don't have that, it will be as if you had a link upper arm, so it's not aiding that effect. That's how it is. And also looking from above, you can also change the angle of it, so to basically like toe out or in the upper arms. So that will affect both kick up and anti-squat, and on the front, because it's a pillow ball car and the caster moves with the upper arm. If you angle it differently as the suspension moves, it will affect caster. So that is not something that I'm going to talk about now because I am not confident talking about it. I don't have a pillow ball car. I haven't tried all those things, and that's why I don't want to talk about it. Okay, but that's what it does. You are able to get different steering feels because of changing caster when the suspension moves, and you are also additionally able to either aid in the movement of the suspension or aid in keeping it more level, so resisting the movement of the suspension with the angling the upper arm differently to the lower arm. Okay, now I answered the question. Now we can move on. When I'm changing the height of the lower arm, is the roll center dominant or the CG arm? I think that when you are changing the height of the lower arm on the inside, so in the ABCD blocks, the relevant thing is how the forces are transferred through the arm. So not really the position of the roll center, but more how the forces affect the movement of the car. That's why a 1/2 mil change on an arm is very significant, but a 1/2 mil change on an upper link, not so much. But then with the upper links, you can change more, and you can actually place the roll center in a completely different place. So upper links, you adjust the position of the roll center. Like, is the car in the track or on the track? And then with the lower arm, you fine tune how the suspension ends up moving, how flat it stays, how much it moves. Okay. No one answered the questions. Silver state or therapy? What do we do now? I almost feel like we just skip silver state. We already talked about it. It's late. We've been doing this over an hour. Okay. Therapy. Okay, thank you. There we go. Silver state, super quick recap. It was good. It was in a casino. We could leave all our stuff there, go to our rooms. I like the layout. I helped Lutz with setup, Invisible Speed Ryan Lutz. It was exciting. I won 40 plus. What did I win? E-buggy. I beat the Ghani. Watch that podcast. We talk about it there. My internet's messing up. How is it looking? Let's check. And also, I had fun. There was some drama with Scotty Ernst not understanding the English language. And that's what we're going to talk about now, actually. Therapy session. Understanding the English language. Yeah, internet's messing up a bit, but oh well. Okay. So let's recap a bit. We've had a couple of therapy sessions already. My internet's really taking shit. Let me see what's happening here. What is happening? I don't have Wi-Fi on. Not even on. It's really annoying. Scott is hacking my Wi-Fi. Maybe. The fuck is going on? Donating from my Patreon fund to help JQ get that fiber Wi-Fi. It might be expensive because I'm in the middle of nowhere here. Gentle Maniac, stick around for the therapy session. I'm going to answer your question here. It's not a question. Sorry. Answer your statement. The info this guy puts out is awesome. He just needs more energy. So dry. Like your mom. Sebastian Wanker. Sebastian Wanker. I love JQ's energy. Tired of people shouting things in my face on social media. Perfect palate cleanser, in my opinion. Okay. Internet's good again. Here we go. Tonight's therapy session. This therapy is both for RC and also sort of for life. Okay. We have so far, we have covered the importance of knowing where your roll centers are. So on a car, you have to know where the front roll center is in relation to the rear roll center. Then you can sort of predict and understand how the car will handle and what kind of changes you need to make to the setup of the car. So it's really a fundamental thing that you have to know about your car. Where are your roll centers? And the same thing applies to yourself. You have to know where your mental roll centers are so that you understand how you need to structure your life, what to do, and how to deal with the hurdles in life so you can be happy and be successful. So cars, you have to understand your roll centers. In your own life, in your mind, you have to understand where your roll centers are. Now, for me, my roll centers have been a bit off, for most of my life. And that's why I started figuring things out, made a few adjustments, and now my roll centers are sort of in a better place. Got a diagnosis of ADHD and high traits of ASD, not pursuing like a diagnosis. I don't need it. That's enough. I have enough info for that. So that was number one, roll centers. And number two was when we know our roll centers, we have to understand that there are different ways of setting up our car. We can set our car up to be very fast, have a lot of initial grip and be aggressive, which makes it harder for us to control, or we can make particular changes to the car to make it easier to drive, more overall grip, and easier to control. It makes our life easier. Likewise, in life, it's like a tightrope almost. You can fall off. You're walking down the tightrope, you have a direction, you know what you want to do. We can make some changes to change that tightrope into a wider path, which is much easier and more stable and safer. And that's also something that I've been working on. So we talked about those two things before, and now I want to talk about something that's very relevant because I got called the world's worst person. Actually, I think it was Jared Tebow said that I am the worst person he has ever met. I believe that's an accurate quote. Also, he gave me the double middle fingers. Jared Tebow literally went, "Fuck you, JQ," with double middle fingers. Now, that came from the heart, I am pretty sure, because it was double. It wasn't just "fuck you." It wasn't just a middle finger. It was "fuck you, JQ," with two middle fingers. And he called me the worst person he has ever met. Okay? So this got me thinking. And it got me thinking about something that is really important in this world. It's perception. Perception versus reality. Now, when it comes to RC cars and the RC industry, it's interesting actually. Like, if we look back a few years, in 8-scale off-road, Kyosho was the brand. Okay, well, maybe it's more than a few years now. Maybe it's like a decade or 15 years or something like that. But like 25 years ago, Kyosho was winning everything. And if you looked at the world's results, it could be like 7 out of 10 cars were Kyoshos. And Kyosho could be like top 5 at the worlds. And Kyosho was just like the shit. It was like Red Bull and Verstappen now. Or, sorry, you don't even need to mention the driver here. It's the brand. Okay, it's like Red Bull in F1, like 1 and 2, done, just the best. So Kyosho as a brand was seen as the best. In the early days when they had their success, it was because the car was very good, but also the quality was good to where they didn't have as many failures as others. But then later on, what happened was Kyosho was still good. They were still winning. They still had many good drivers, but the quality wasn't actually that good, right? Like they would break a lot. Like even I remember 2010 Worlds, like there was that picture of Tebow boiling arms and stuff, and like they had some issues, right? But people's perception of Kyosho was like, I used to call it the magic car, the Japanese magic car. It was really good, but it had some weaknesses, it had some issues. Those weaknesses and issues by customers were just glossed over. The perception was Kyosho is amazing. There's no issues with Kyosho. So if someone broke an arm, they were like, oh, I crashed, I broke an arm. Not that, oh, the Kyosho arm is a bit weak, plastic's not too good. No, that wasn't the reaction. The reaction was, Kyosho is awesome. I crashed really hard into a tree. I broke an arm, right? Perception. You could take another brand who had a very similar situation. An arm would break. It's like, this is shit. This car sucks. The arms suck, they break. Okay? What's real there? Like, where is reality? What's the truth? Does that arm suck? Is the Kyosho arm okay? Is it great? That's irrelevant. The relevant thing is people's perception of the brand, people's perception of the quality of the car. That's actually more important for success than the actual truth, the actual reality. So the brand perception is key. Another thing that's sort of similar to this is people today, when they make decisions about buying cars, one thing that factors into it is the percentage discount that they get and being on a team. But they miss actually the actual dollar amount that they pay, sometimes literally, because they could have a bigger percentage discount and be on some team and be paying more for parts than somewhere else. But the percentage is less and level of team or whatever is less, perception versus reality. Perception is that it's better, but actually if you look at the dollar figures, it's not, so this is relevant because I think that I have always cared more about the facts and reality over perception. And one thing that frustrates me in the world really a lot is how reality and facts are not really what determine the outcomes or success. It's more the perception people have. And it doesn't have to be real. It doesn't have to be true. But the way people think about something, feel about something, that is what matters. Reality does not. And I have always been someone who cares more about reality. Thibaut said that when at Silver State, yes, he had some like super late flight, like I don't know at what time. He was leaving the hotel at midnight or 1 a.m. or something, and we happened to leave or go out, and we were taking a taxi and leaving to go out. And yeah, that's when he did that. Okay, let's get back to it. So how does this tie back to me being the world's worst person, or the worst person he has ever met, more accurately? That's funny. My MP10 has been breaking a lot on small accidents. Well, there you go. So where do we start to unpack this? Let me think. Reminds me about marketing lessons on branding and how when you reach critical mass and become an industry leader, it's really hard to fall from grace due to minor inconveniences. Yes, that is true. Tons of examples: perception versus truth, quality, iPhone and Android, VHS and Betamax. Yes, that is true. There are better phones than an iPhone, but iPhone is the market leader. Okay, so I mentioned how this perception versus reality affects sort of the RC brands and the RC industry. What about in your mind, in your personal life, in navigating this life we have? What's the issue? Perception versus reality. So Thibaut, he perceives me as the worst person he has ever met. So does that mean that I am a bad person, or have I been a bad person to Thibaut? How did this happen? What's going on here? I think that it's not true. Okay, let's put it that way. I don't think it's true. I think he's actually dealt with and met people who are worse than me, but he feels like I am the worst person. So his perception is that. Okay, and if we think about life, then that's how he will treat me. That's how people he influences are going to treat me or think of me, okay, as the worst person. So that's an example of reality doesn't matter. What happened, how I am really doesn't matter. How he perceives me matters in this case, right? That's a microcosm of everything. How people get treated, if you observe another person, and they are, let's say that other person is adored by people, praised by people, they are treated very well, they are respected. That doesn't actually mean that they are a good person. If there is another example of a person and they are actually a bad person, if there is another person and they are not respected, they are not treated well, they are maybe even hated, disrespected, treated badly, that doesn't mean that they are a bad person. So how people get treated is not a good way to judge if a person is good or not. Do you see what I mean? They do not correlate. I can give an example. So there can be someone that there can be a person that creates an image which people look up to, and they use social media and various other means to create a sort of image for themselves. But they can actually be extremely selfish and cruel people who mentally, emotionally, physically maybe abuse others. They can be criminals, but people can perceive them as good, right? Because they're not being honest with the things they are saying and claiming to do and how they are claiming to be. Okay, so the perception of them can be one way, but then the reality can be the opposite. You know, they are actually not this great person that they created this image of, and people are looking up to them. They are actually in reality different, and there is strong contrast between that. But in the world we live in, that perception is what counts, and that's why people who are selfish and cruel can be very successful and even well liked and loved. People who are liars and who cheat, they can be well liked and respected because of that. Then you can have someone who maybe lives in a country where human rights are not very strongly established, and let's say that they are really good people and they actually care about all human beings, and they wouldn't harm anyone, and they are fair and they are honest, but they speak up for people who are oppressed, for example, then they can be perceived as bad people because they are speaking against, you know, whatever that system that is in place. Okay, so social media and people with influence over others can paint that person as a bad person. Okay, and then the perception of that person, even though they are a good person who care about everyone and they do good things, they can be treated badly, right? So how people get treated, how people get talked about is not a good way to determine if they are actually good or bad. That's always how I think about people and things and events. And that's why it's increasingly frustrating, I would say, to exist in this world, because what I just described is what happens on, for example, social media so much, where reality has stopped mattering. And now, instead of focusing on what is the actual truth, what is actual reality, now that sort of perception is what's more important. So it's just sort of creating these illusions of people or events or whatever that topic is. And people don't seem to care anymore more about what actually happened, what was actually said, what is the actual facts, what is reality. It's just these sort of stories and TikTok videos of whatever, okay, whatever that is, that matters. That's what I care about. It's annoying. So, if we think about this situation a bit, then the thing is that the way to sort of the way to be successful in today's world, the way to be successful, the way to be sort of widely and universally liked and supported is to most likely be, in some sense, inauthentic and hypocritical. You are forced to be. You have to be, because if you have strongly held beliefs, and even if they are good, if you express them, you will meet resistance. Okay. So if you want to be sort of widely accepted, respected, liked, and successful, you would have to keep some things to yourself, not speak out, not say what you believe to be right, in order to not upset some people. So that means that you have to be complicit in some things that go on or that happen that you don't agree with. Because I think that sort of, if we take an extreme example, okay, you're just walking down the street, and then there's some crime is being committed right there, and you could intervene in a sense that you could sort of, or I don't know, let's make it even more simple and clear. Let's just say that there are children there, and they are like 10-year-old children, okay, and there's 3 children that are bullying one child, okay. So it's perfectly safe for you to intervene and just sort of stop what's going on. And maybe there's even some violence involved, or there's some risk to that one child. So let's say that you see what happens, but you do not intervene, okay? And let's say what ends up happening is that one child who is being bullied gets really badly hurt, or maybe even dies or drowns or something like that, because they, push him off a bridge or something. I don't know. Like, there's something like that could become serious that's happening. But for you to intervene, you could safely do it. Okay. So if you don't do it, if you do not intervene, and it happens, in a way, you didn't do it, you didn't cause it, but in a sense, you're sort of complicit, or like you didn't care enough to stop it. Like, what responsibility did you have to sort of speak up or do something there? You didn't do the bad thing, but you could have stopped the bad thing. So in life, we constantly have these situations. We constantly have big and small decisions to make, but they all come down to the same question of, I have my beliefs. I believe this is right and this is wrong. Now, do I act on them? I'm in this situation where I believe this thing that's happening is wrong. Do I intervene or do I not? So if we always choose to not intervene, if we always choose to not speak up and not say anything, if we lived in apartheid South Africa and we didn't speak out against that and say that it's wrong, or if we are living right now and there's Israel-Palestine conflict, and we are in some actual position of power, and we don't speak out or don't say, state our opinion, like, what is that? It means that we are deciding to protect ourselves, our own interest, over doing what we believe is right. So if we, for example, think that, I think that these bullies who are bullying this child, they are wrong. I'm against bullying. I'm against violence. I'm against hurting another human being. I should stop these bullies, but we don't do it. Then we are not being honest with ourselves. We're being hypocrites. We are saying one thing, but then in life, we are not acting that way. That means that we are being hypocritical. But then if we also, for example, publicly state that we actually have this anti-bullying campaign going on, and we support peace and equality and no bullying and this kind of stuff, if we are sort of active in that scene, and then in reality in our lives we don't intervene, not only are we hypocritical, but we are also entering this situation where we are being inauthentic. We are not being real. We are not portraying an image of ourselves that is honest and truthful, accurate, real. And the way to be successful, I think, in the world we live in, is to be, to a too far extent, hypocritical and a too far extent inauthentic. And this is like the single biggest thing that has caused the most issues in my life, and the most like has hindered my further success the most. And it's that I have this very strong need to not to be right, in a sense. Like Lefty said in the podcast that what was it he said? He said something like, everything has to be my way. No, it doesn't. It does not have to be my way. But the thing is that I always want to understand. That's one thing that I have noticed clearly. I strive to understand things more than your average person. So I just don't sort of take on board information and without understanding. No, I want to understand and know that it's right. So because I have this approach, if I have a very strong belief, it's because I have thought about it, researched it, learned to understand it. So I understand it. So I believe myself to be right. Okay. And then, so that's sort of one thing. And then the other is that I have a very strong sense of fairness and justice. And I can't stand things that are unfair or, in my opinion, wrong. So because of these things, I tend to always try to be authentically myself, honest, and avoid being a hypocrite. Because of this, when I see things that I believe to be wrong, I speak up. I speak out against it. I don't, if I walk by those bullies bullying the child, I will intervene. But you always have these situations in your life. You always have to make these decisions. And sometimes it's a good thing to intervene or speak up, and sometimes it's not worth it. And far too often I will intervene or I will speak up when it's not worth it. You know, because it doesn't actually help in any way, but it hinders my further success, let's put it that way. So that is a sort of clear issue. But in the moment, it's hard to determine if it's worth it or not. Those 3 kids who are bullying that child, maybe you intervene and it actually turns out that they were they were just amongst friends, or nothing bad was actually going on, you know, or it was a real situation, but it didn't really matter in the end. And maybe even the child who was bullied, you know, he went through this experience and then he fought back and he stood up for himself, and then, you know, things turned out good. Like, you don't know when it's the right moment to intervene, right moment to speak up, stand up for something, and when you should just leave it, right? You don't always know. So for me, I tend to do it too often versus not enough. So that has definitely been something that has sort of hindered my further success. On the other hand, it's also the reason I believe that I have been able to get this far and gain this success with so much less than many competitors, because I have always very clearly stated who I am, what my opinion is, and what I believe. And a lot of people who have, started running the JQ car, or joined Mayako, or supported Invisible Speed, they appreciate that. They appreciate the honesty, and that's why they support what I do. So it has two sides to it. So when we go back now to think about this statement, like where this whole thing started, it was Thibaut said that I am the worst person he has ever met. Okay. And reality, if we look at reality, I don't believe that to be true. But if we look at perception, I believe that may very well be true. And like I said, perception is what matters. Perception is what determines to a great degree the outcomes of situations. So for me, if I was able to, like, if I made the decision, you know what, I'm going to change as a person. I am now, from now on, I am going to be a lot more agreeable, and I will not sort of speak my opinion as directly or at all. I will keep it more to myself, and I will be more attuned to other people's sort of wishes and desires, and see what they need from me, and I will try to provide that. I'm sure I would be more liked. Maybe I wouldn't be the worst person Thibaut has ever met. But the thing is that if I did that, I would be inauthentic, because that's not me. I think learning about my role centers, adjusting my role centers, giving myself more overall grip helps me to get to this next point, which is to learn to not affect other people so negatively that they think that I am the world's worst person. But I have to do it in a way where I am still authentically myself, where I still am, in my own eyes, as little of a hypocrite as possible. And that's where I would say that I currently am. And I don't really have an answer. Like, I know that at Silver State, for example, the first day we arrived, we set up the pits, we were working on our cars, and then there was a bunch of people going to the pool. And I thought, you know what, I haven't seen the sun in like 6 months, so I'm going to go. I went to the pool, and I was there. There was Westergaard and Nick Miller and Mayfield and the Nelson family. And then at one point, Mayfield said, like, JQ's trying to be nice or something. Like, we were just talking and doing that. And I said, no, that's because I'm trying some ADHD medication. I'm not trying anything. I'm just here. And yeah, so it was funny that he said that, because one thing that the medication definitely does is it makes me feel more positive, in the sense like I'm not on a tightrope, I have a path. When I'm on that path walking, and I'm there's lower risk of me falling off in any direction, I feel like I have the capacity and stability to be more social and friendly with people. So then in that moment, he, without knowing this, made that statement. But I hadn't even been thinking about that, but then when he made that statement, then I realized, like, okay, so maybe this is something that is noticeable, because I notice it, but other people also notice that. So that was really interesting. How does it sit with you to know that you have this perception about yourself from Thibaut? Does it affect you in any way? I think it affects me in the way that I think about it and sort of wonder why, or try to find try to understand and find a solution or an improvement. But it doesn't affect me like I worry about it or I care about it. I don't give a shit in that sense, because if it was, I think the only people who I would say that I would care what they think is like my girlfriend, or like I have 2 friends here in Finland who I ride motocross with, like them. To be honest, like most other people, the closer people that I work with and deal with, yes, but not as much. Like it's just them. And otherwise, like Thibaut, it doesn't matter. It doesn't faze me. Like I don't care. But yeah, it, of course, it sort of makes you think about it. Like why? What is it? Like why does he think this? And yeah, it's like that. Let me think. Like, what was the conclusion here? Did we have a conclusion here? I feel like I had something I wanted to say. Like there was some final thought I had, but I can't think of it now. Let me think. Damn, I should have written some proper notes. Come on, what was it? It was something about this. There was one more point I wanted to make. Damn, what was it? It's annoying. Answer some setup questions, then it will come back. I don't know. There are no setup questions here. Everyone gets their feelings hurt so easily, it seems. Yes, they do. Oh, man. Being able to distinguish when you are being your true self and people pleasing could be great to make conscious choices about. Yes. Everyone has things to work on. This is true. Can you focus better on them? Is not really. Like I don't think that. I think I'm able to concentrate and focus, but what the medication does is more sort of improve motivation to actually do things, to sort of do the things you don't really want to do. that it helps with, definitely. And then, yeah, the social thing is a definite difference too. But for, like, let's say driving your RC car or something, no. For me, no, at least. I could always focus on that. But maybe one thing that I did notice is it's kind of easier to, or like you have a bit more confidence because you're more positive in a way. And that was interesting, but I'd have to do some more more races to see if it's a real thing. Yes. So more overall grip gives you time to become conscious before it happens. Yes. Basically, the more self-awareness creates more overall grip for you. Or let's say with more self-awareness, you can make the correct adjustments to get more overall grip, which means that you have slower load transfer and you have more time to react and decide how to respond in situations. Like, you can deal with situations in life smoother and better because you have that slightly longer time before you respond. You have a bit less initial grip, less response, more overall grip, more time to respond, which is good. It smooths things out. Exactly. Lots of initial grip. You can be more prone to give out the negative perception willingly or unwillingly, but it is less of a choice. It just happens unexpectedly. How do you think your perception in the past versus now has affected your business relationships versus personal relationships? I think that business relationships are pretty much the same, as in, let's say, sort of perception and what's the word? Reception from customers. Sort of, there's that love-hate dynamic, definitely. That's always been there. I would say the biggest change is probably for my personal relationships. So there are not, let's say, there are not many of them, but they are much better. And that is purely because of the understanding where the role centers are, making slight adjustments, and having more overall grip. So that has made the personal relationships a lot better now compared to before. Man, I wish I could remember what that thing was. It was something about it was like a conclusion to the like almost like an answer to Tebow in a sense, you know. But man, I really can't remember how I wanted it to go. Hi, Joseph. Try to be more forgiving with yourself. I always say to me this word: leave yourself alone, relax. Yeah, that's true. Leave yourself alone. Hey, Jimmy says, you're not the worst person. I agree with you. I stand with, and I don't know. He didn't write it. Yeah, I don't think I'll remember this. Maybe if I remember, I'll explain it on the next live. So anyway, in 2 weeks, the 30th, we'll have another live, I think, YouTube live, but also we will have an Invisible Speed online course live. So for all the course members, Ryan Lutz will be on, and we'll talk about Philippine Masters and Silver State setup and other stuff and Q&A. So if you have not joined the course, now would be a good time. You get 3 months and you get a bunch of live meetings that we'll be doing here over the season. So the first one of them is the 30th of this month. JQ is too honest for some people. Yes, too honest for most people. When is the Lutz recording coming to the course? It is in the course. So the Lutz meeting we had is in the course material. It's after the module 10. There's whatever it's called, I don't remember. After that, you'll find it there. So yeah, the previous Lutz meeting, it's there. Go check. Okay. Good energy is often contagious. Yes. Actually, this is one thing that I've noticed. So I very much, okay, this is not always the case. Sometimes I have a sort of predetermined demeanor or mood or whatever. But I very much feed off other people's energy. And if you approach me with negativity or hostility, that is what you're going to get from me. But very often it's not like the response that I give is not proportional or the same. Like what you give to me, I will give back, but some extra. And if we if I look back at many different sort of relationships and situations, that's very much how it's been. Like the way the person has been, like there is a person who is very positive or like, oh, we'll find a solution for this or whatever. Even if we don't agree on things, we get along. Okay, I approach the situation with that same energy. If there are people who are very negative and they blame and they complain and they cry, then I sort of respond to them with that same energy, like negative energy, you know. So that's something that I think it's a sort of feature. It's a bug in a sense, but it's a feature in how I am, where in those situations I should be able to still be sort of authentically myself, how I am. I believe myself to be this kind of person. I'm positive. I believe there's always a solution and we'll find it. And okay, that's how I am. So if someone approaches me with negativity, I should not respond with negativity. I should respond as myself, as how I believe me to be, right? But it affects me. Like in that moment, their energy is contagious and I respond with that same energy. So yes, I definitely relate to that. That's basic human nature. Your response is equal to the initial contact. Yes, but I think that emotionally intelligent people are able to control that response. Damn, I really don't remember that conclusion. But anyway, hopefully I said something sensible in there. Pekko says, you are the worst person I have met. The same goes to Pekko. Pekko is the worst person I've ever met. And I've met some bad people. So. Anyway, it's time to go. It's fucking over 2 hours already. Thank you for today. Really have appreciated that ADHD insights, since my wife most likely has it, and it has given me more insight into how her reality might be like. Well, that's interesting. I'm helping someone's marriage. I didn't expect that. Hey, JQ, we see us in Montpellier. No, I'm not going to the Electric Euros in Montpellier, but Robert and Pekko are going, at least. So, marriage counselor JQ. Now that is very unexpected. Extremely unexpected, I would say. Still 100 people. What the hell? Salty Joe agrees with Pekko. I am also the worst person he has met, I suppose. I have to go to sleep. We have work to do tomorrow. That's what Pekko says. Yes, he has to build a car. And I'm actually still working on some bookkeeping stuff. How fun. Cheers, Jakey. Always a pleasure despite your pauses. Yeah. I'm trying to figure out what to say in the pauses. You should have watched the 5th scale Silver State. There were fights, marshals getting taken out. It looked like a shit show compared to 1/8 scale Silver State. That sounds like there was some drama there. It's good I'm not into 5th scale. Okay, time to go. Join the course. We have live meetings coming. Okay. There we go. Over and out.